we're going to talk about how to use lean tools and practices to improve our own performance and that of our teams. So as Lisa said, I'm Sara. I'm from the focus team in Oxford, and that is what we call the Continuous Improvement and Change team. There's 11 of us who work on projects and growing the CI skills across the university. And Emma and Maria I'm joined by them today, and they're focus practitioners, CI practitioners. So let's get going. Our topics today, we're going to start by thinking more generally about how we can improve ourselves through feedback, reflection, and changing our behaviour. And then we have 3 tools to show you that we use very, very frequently at Oxford. The first one is called POD, and that stands for Positives, Opportunities and Development. And that's for individual improvement. We then have AAR, which is an after-action review, which can be used for teams and groups of people. And I'm sure that won't be new to you, but hopefully it will be interesting to see how we do it. And Discoveries, which is about learning every day. Now, we're going to take questions and comments at the end of each section. So please do put any feedback you've got in the chat. Or we will also take live questions as well. And in true lean style, we'd like your feedback on this event that we've run, and we will give you a chance to practice an AAR with a link to a Miro board at the end. Okay, so let's have a few discussion points to go through first to really set the context for this topic. Now, I've just completed the Couch to 5K programme. That was me on the sofa after lockdown. Each session, you run a little bit more and you walk a little bit less. I had a goal in mind, and that was to run 5K. I had the app on my phone to direct me each session. I had a good playlist of music and some determination. Now, I had a few niggles along the way. It wasn't all plain sailing. A few niggly injuries held me up a bit, but I got there in the end. So the CI improvement, the continuous improvement approach to fitness worked, and it has done for thousands of other people. And this got me thinking, how do we use this philosophy and techniques to develop our minds and our performance in a work context? After all, I always think that continuous improvement is actually about a mindset. So just like in a process review, we need to uncover the issues in our current state, and we do this by feedback from others. We then need to analyse and reflect and think about ways to improve our performance. But we must also implement our changes, just like in one of our projects, and commit to that action, and then evaluate if it has been successful through feedback. So this is very like the plan, do, check, act cycle, but applied to ourselves. Now, giving and receiving feedback is a course in itself, and there are many good resources online to help guide us on this. So we're not going to go into that topic in particular today, excuse me. But I'd like to draw your attention to something I found really useful in thinking about feedback. And this is the Johari window. So there are 4 quadrants based around what is known, what is unknown, and to yourself and to others. So if we look at that top left area, the open area, this is the arena, as it's sometimes called. This is the public domain. This is things we're happy to share with others. The bottom left area is the hidden area, things you know about yourself that others don't. And this is perfectly acceptable. We don't have to share everything. The unknown area, the yellow area, this is not known to you or to others, which sounds a bit confusing, but I think we can think of this as your potential. For example, who knew that Emma Raducanu could win the US Open a few weeks ago? But the area I wanted to talk about in the context of this presentation is the blind area. Things that are known by others about us, but not known to ourselves. For example, how do we really come across at meetings? How do we really come across giving presentations? What's the quality of how is the quality of our reports perceived by others? So the purpose of feedback is to uncover things that are in our blind spot. They're known to others, but not to ourselves. And we have a worry that this can only be negative, but of course, positive feedback is really important too. So when we receive feedback, what do we do with it? Well, I really like this quote. I think it really resonated with me. We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on our experience. It's so true, and it's not easy to do. Or it's not easy to do constructively, because for that, we need to embrace a growth mindset. This is what we tell our stakeholders that we work with when we're introducing change. And this is where you do not see your abilities as fixed, but that they can be improved with effort and practice. You start to relish feedback because it's an opportunity to develop. Challenges help me grow. Feedback is constructive. I like to try new things. We encourage this in our children, but sometimes as adults we get stuck and even afraid to some extent. We resist new challenges for fear of failure and can take feedback very personally. We've all been there, we've all done it. But a growth mindset is a continuous improvement mindset, and then the sky's the limit. So I'd like to hand over, giving you those things to think about. I'm handing over to Emma now to talk about the pod tool that I mentioned. Emma, are you there? Because I know you had some IT problems earlier.
I am here. Thank you,
Good.
Sara. Can you hear me? I can see that you can hear me.
Yes, so I can hear you.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Emma Morris, and I'm one of the continuous improvement practitioners in the CI team at Oxford. And I'm going to talk to you about a tool, the pod tool, that we use for seeking feedback from others about our own personal performance. So even though in our roles, can I have the next slide, please, Sara?
Yeah.
Thank you. Even though in our own roles we're immersed in continuous improvement practice, it's very easy to lose sight of our own daily personal development and to forget that we can apply the principles of continuous improvement to ourselves and experience the same benefits that we get when we apply them to our processes and activities. So I'm going to talk to you today about how we do this within our CI community at Oxford. And by that, I mean our CI team, our network of CI practitioners across the university, and indeed anybody else who we come into contact with and we have the opportunity to talk to about this. And also to show how in doing this, we're engaging others in the approach. So in order to feed the growth mindset that Sara's just spoken about, it needs to be fed by lots of regular information in the form of feedback about how you're doing and how you can improve. And of course, it's this feedback that's going to help us to uncover what's in that blind area on the Johari window. And small morsels of regularly received feedback is more aligned with the incremental approach of CI than the kind of annual or half-yearly appraisals that many of us have in our organisations. And that's when we're asking people for feedback and they feel that they've got to provide, I don't know, a whole year's worth of feedback. They might find it difficult to remember or default just to the last time that they worked with you. So we're looking to get lots of smaller pieces of feedback much more regularly. But if you're not already taking this approach to your own personal development, then it involves quite a significant change. And like all change we introduce, we need to take steps to sustain it and create a habit out of it. And so it becomes part of our normal routine, part of our working practice that we don't have to think about. And then once we've established a routine of seeking feedback, the rewards that we get from this will help us to keep motivated and will reinforce the habit. But it can be really difficult to get started, and this is why we think it's always useful to have a tool, particularly when our gut response to asking for feedback or indeed giving feedback may look like something like this. So that is often how we feel when we're told that we need to ask for feedback. And there are many reasons for feeling like that. And often that, you know, similar to the obstacles that we face when we're trying to introduce CI concepts to people who haven't come across them before. New things just feel uncomfortable. We were speaking to some of our associate practitioners at a meeting the other day about the use of some of our tools. And one of our colleagues said that when they joined our CI team for their secondment period, and they knew they had to do this seeking feedback and using a pod, they absolutely hated the idea. It was the one thing that they were dreading. And I think that's quite a common reaction. Sometimes it can be difficult to invite scrutiny and to draw attention to ourselves, particularly if that's not something you would do normally. We might not be sure where to start. What should we be asking, and how should we be asking? And then you might be a bit concerned about the feedback you're going to get. What if you get negative feedback? How is that going to make you feel, and what should I do with it? Another of our associate practitioners, when we were discussing the pod, felt that there was perhaps a culture of perfectionism in the organisation. And so this made it more likely that you would receive critical feedback, and that was something that put them off doing it. You might be worried that somebody's just going to say no if you ask, and that can always be a bit awkward, getting that knockback and rejection. And also it's a time thing. Have my busy colleagues got time to do this for me, or is it too much to ask? So it is really useful to have a tool that you can use. And we use the pod, which Sara has already said stands for positives, opportunities and development. So an excerpt from the form. So this shows you just, you know, it's a very, very simple form. What we're asking the reviewer to do is to provide feedback on positives, on what went well, on opportunities, things that might have been done differently, an opportunity for you to improve. The reviewee then reflects on what the reviewer has told them, and importantly, then thinks about what insights they're going to get from that, about how they're going to change their behaviour. And then importantly, there are actions to take, because it's no good getting the feedback if you're not going to act on it. So it's a very simple tool, and it allows your reviewer to provide their feedback in a very positive and constructive way. So we tend to use it after an event like a workshop or a meeting. So I'll be asking colleagues who are in this session today to do a pod for me, but we might also do it after a piece of work has concluded. So here is an example of a completed pod form. I'm just going to give you a minute just to read through that quickly rather than reading it out to you. So this is just an example of some feedback that somebody got having done, been at a meeting, arranged a meeting. Okay, so what the reviewee has learnt from using the pod is that the preparation that they put into the agenda was really worthwhile and it was appreciated, but that they need to make sure that they don't rush the production of the slide pack. And they've decided that, you know, in future they need to make sure that they get they leave enough time to proofread the slide pack properly, and that they should have it reviewed by a colleague so that they can sense check it and pick up any typos, etc. You know, another action might have been that they needed to do a bit more training on how to use PowerPoint and make their presentations better. But that is what this person who sought this feedback decided to do. And you'll see that they've also set themselves a time when they're going to do that. So they've got a presentation in 2 weeks' time, and they're going to use that as an opportunity to put these changes into place. So these are very small and simple things that can be acted on. And so the pod, this form, helps to overcome many of the challenges that we've just discussed when people start to ask for personal feedback. So it gets you started. It provides a solution to the problem of what am I going to ask and how am I going to ask it. It is really simple to use, and you don't have to worry that you're asking too much of someone's time. They could put one or two things. It doesn't have to be a big essay about how you did. And it's structured to help the reviewer provide feedback in a constructive way. And the advantages of using this tool over just informally asking colleagues for their feedback is that you've got a record of your feedback, and so you can reflect over time and make sure that you are putting in place the actions that you said that you were going to take. It also gives your reviewer some time and space to think and reflect, rather than having to respond to a kind of passing request for, you know, how did that go? What did you think? And it's also an opportunity for you to get feedback from people who probably wouldn't give their feedback informally, particularly people who you don't know very well, who you might not feel comfortable just asking in person. So it's important to note as well that the pod and the feedback you've received through the tool, we see it as being for your personal use. So it's not something that you have to share with your manager or anybody else unless you choose to, although in Focus we do tend to review our pods with our line manager every few months. We just find that helpful, but it really is just for you and your own personal development. So in order to make sure we use our pods to best effect, it's really important to plan and prepare, particularly when you're using it to start with and you just might forget or be putting it off. So think about up and coming opportunities and make sure you put them in your diary. Look for things that are coming up and think, is this a good opportunity to use a pod? It's worth asking your reviewer in advance if they would do it for you rather than after the event, so that they know that they should be thinking about that perhaps when they're watching your presentation, and to explain it to them if they haven't used one before. Be flexible about how they provide the feedback. So those questions that were on the form, if they're more comfortable just putting the responses in an email, that's fine. And a colleague of ours has set up a Teams form with the questions in, and they just send the link and the person can submit their responses very easily. Seek feedback from a variety of people. Don't always ask the same people or rely on your close colleagues. I think at the beginning we did do that, particularly in, you know, we would be asking our fellow continuous improvement practitioners to do the pods. But as you build confidence, it's really good to start asking more broadly, and that will open up even more of what's in that blind area on the Johari window. You know, if you're doing a presentation and you know someone is attending who you think is particularly good at presentations, just get in touch in advance and ask if they would be prepared to do that for you, do you some feedback. And then taking action. The other thing that you need to do is to take action. The next slide, please, Sara. Thank you. So again, reflect carefully on the feedback and try not to react. You might not always agree with the opportunities that somebody suggested, but try to think about why the reviewer made the suggestion, and always have at least one action to improve based on the feedback and a date when you'll have done it by, and hold yourself accountable or just tell a colleague so that they can give you a nudge. Keep your pods and review them at regular intervals, because you might see a theme emerging that you'd like to focus on in your personal development. I know that I noticed that I was getting comments about presentation of data in it. The insight I had was that actually I was avoiding using Excel to its full potential just because I wasn't confident. So I started to do some training courses in Excel to help me with that. And then you can use them to help you to plan for your PDR and support requests for training or other development in your role, and just to show your line manager that you're taking your personal development seriously and what you've achieved by doing that. So one of the questions that we are asked when we talk about pods is, well, this is all very well, but if I'm the only person doing it in my organisation, you know, what if the environment is not receptive to this approach to getting personal feedback? And that is not an insignificant challenge for people who are starting to do this, because you might effectively be launching your quest for feedback into an environment that is not receptive or not yet receptive. But I think that all of the ways that I've outlined of using the pod effectively will over time help to create a more receptive environment. So by using the pod regularly ourselves and seeking feedback from a diverse range of people, we're exposing them to it. And by talking to them about it, we might show them, and they might see that there's some benefit in them using the tools themselves. And then by acting on the feedback, we've got examples of the benefits we've gained from that when we're advocating for the use of regular feedback. If we're using our pods in our development reviews with our managers or discussions with them, they might see the benefit of the tool and start to encourage other members of their teams to use it. So in many ways, this is the same as when we're introducing colleagues to any lean or CI approach that is new and different. By regularly using this ourselves, seeking feedback by ourselves, we're not only paying attention and nurturing our own development, but we're introducing the approach to others and leading by doing. So that was all I wanted to say, but it would be really interesting to hear what approaches you're using in your organisation for continuous personal development, and what are the challenges that you face and what successes you've had. So I don't know if there's anything in the chat, Maria, that I know you've been...
Yeah, so we've got a few questions in the chat. We've got one from Graham, which I'll take, and then I'll allocate the others to you. So Graham's asked if this is something we'd hand out to delegates today, for example. So today, I'll tell you what we are doing. I know that Emma and myself have asked people in the team to give us feedback because we knew they would be in the session. So that's personal feedback. And in the next part of this session, we're going to talk about the type of feedback that we do within teams and with teams, which is slightly different. But yes, essentially the answer to your question is yes, that in advance of workshops and things like that, we try to identify who could ask for a pod and who we thought would be receptive to that. We had a question from Nicole, which Sara, you might take. It's asking about whether they'd be used within performance reviews to decide on objectives.
Thanks, Maria. Yes, I think, Nicole, I think I've certainly reviewed the pods. The last time we had a sort of 6-monthly kind of appraisal, midterm review, I called it. I asked everyone to, if they were happy to share the pods that they'd had with me, and they were very useful to sort of talk about development and also successes. I have to say, we kind of see this, it's very important that things to develop are picked out, but it was, of course, overwhelmingly, there was a lot of positive feedback in the pods, and we mustn't forget that. It was really nice for me to read as a manager and for me to discuss with the team. So I think that's another thing to draw out. It's a really good way of getting positive feedback as well as areas that you perhaps need to develop. So I'd really recommend it from a management point of view for that reason.
We've got a question from Julie, which Emma, hopefully you'll be happy to take, asking whether we can set this up, whether we could set this up as team feedback rather than personal feedback. So she's thinking of using an online team to ask for feedback on how her team have handled the induction process.
Yes, I mean, I think that the questions that are on the pod form lend themselves to a variety of situations, because you know, you are just asking what went well, what could have been better, and how are we going to make sure that we learn from that and do something differently next time. So I think, yes, you could use exactly the same format for that. You might also be interested in the after action review that you're going to hear about in a moment. That might also be you know, a way of doing that, but it is essentially structuring any kind of feedback so that it can be constructive and positive, understanding, you know, making sure that you don't forget what went well and why it went well, looking at what could have been different, and then importantly, how you're going to make it different in future.
Great, so we'll probably have time to cover one more question at this point, and we will have other pause points later on. Sara, would you be able to answer Nicola's question about whether the tool is used in isolation by the individual or in partnership with the mentor or manager, and whether there's kind of training available to managers and mentors to help people being overly critical of themselves?
Yes, as I said, this is very much a tool for the individual, but to be shared with the manager if they are comfortable with that. And I certainly encourage my team to do that, as I said. I think I didn't have training in using this tool per se, but I've, as a manager, I suppose I've had training in giving and receiving feedback and etc. I think the overcritical question is a really interesting one. I found this tool has allowed people, it's that moment of reflection that I said in my slides was so important, that actually you're thinking, well, why was that? And let's talk about that, and getting down to the root cause, which of course is we're all very good at with our 5 whys, and actually how could that be better in the future, and sort of don't beat yourself up about it. You know, these things happen. So I think it is a really useful discussion point as well. Because generally people want to do a good job, and they're keen to understand how they can improve. So it's having that growth mindset and not taking it personally, I think, which we try to encourage.
Thanks to Carla, who's shared that she uses stop, start, continue model. So we also use, we tend to use that in situations where we're looking at projects or processes rather than for personal feedback, but that is also kind of a really good tool that has lots of very flexible uses. Sara, Emma, is there anything else you want to say at this point?
No, I don't think so, thank you. I think some of these questions might come out with the AAR section that you're about to do, Maria, so shall we move on to that then? Thanks everyone for your comments, really interesting. I will move the slide on, that will help.
So I'm Maria Morris, and I'm also one of the continuous improvement practitioners at Oxford, but I'm not related to Emma Morris. We're just colleagues. As Sara mentioned earlier, we learn by reflecting on our experience. So even though we're often extremely busy, focusing on the task in hand and in a hurry to move on to what needs to be done next, developing our continuous improvement capability requires us to pause and look back. Emma spoke about doing this on an individual level, and I'm going to talk a bit more about doing this with a team or as part of a team. So no doubt most of you already do this in some form already. You may call it different things at different points or for different purposes. So it may be a debrief, a retrospective, lessons learned, or something else. Today we're going to discuss one of the methods we find most helpful, what works well for us and what we find challenging. The tool that we use for reflecting as part of a team is an after-action review, a simple review technique to capture feedback and reflect on improvements. The tool has its origin in the military, and it's also used widely, we think, in the National Health Service in the UK, with the goal from learning from mistakes. At Oxford, we do also use them in this context, and a colleague of ours has recently used one to review a major IT incident. One of the advantages of using this tool after a crisis or a mistake is that it helps to remove some of the emotion from a situation where something's gone wrong, and to reset the scene by looking for how teams and organisations can use mistakes as a learning opportunity rather than looking for someone to blame. In this respect, we're trying to be more like the airline industry, I guess. But more often, we aren't looking back at mistakes in particular, we're looking to continuously improve our practice. Capturing feedback at a point in time, either after an activity or after a period of time. After action reviews allow us to widen the lens. We aren't just capturing what we think could be better here. The real value is getting perspectives from others on what went well or less well, trying to establish one version of the truth, and so that future activity improves in an agreed direction, so that things that are working well are identified and taken forward into our practice and our personal development, and so that we can improve on those areas identified as needing a new approach. So this is the template that we use for this. So in practice, generally we try to do an after action review as soon as possible after an event or activity, while everything's still fresh in people's minds. We include as many people as possible who are involved so that a wide range of viewpoints can be explored. A prerequisite is that everyone feels able to contribute without fear of blame. After action reviews are about learning and improving things going forward. So as you can see, key questions are what went well and why, and what could be better and how. We find that identifying why things went well is really useful in identifying good practice. And it's something that other approaches we've seen don't seem to focus on so much. Generally, we take about an hour to do an after action review. starting with what went well to open up the discussion and spending most time talking about the why and the how before moving on to an action plan with tangible actions designed to improve the running of the event, service or process in the future. The discussion can be facilitated by anyone in the team, and it should strengthen the team rather than divide it. Getting a more neutral facilitator might be a good idea if what you're reviewing is particularly contentious or in any way contentious. The key thing to remember as a facilitator is to ensure everyone has the opportunity to participate, including quieter members of the group, to keep to the allocated time, to define ground rules like openness, equality, confidentiality, and a focus on learning and continuous improvement. So if we can move on to the next slide, we'll show you a record of an after action review that has been recently facilitated by one of the continuous improvement practitioners in our team. So it doesn't really matter if you can't read all of the text on here. It's just to show you how we've adopted this in Miro, which is the tool that we're using while we're working remotely and in the future. This one was done at the end of a project with project team members and a sponsor who hadn't worked with us using our continuous improvement methodology before. Some of the reflections on why things went well and how they could be better can now be incorporated into our practice and other projects. Others are ideas for the project team members to take away into their own personal development plans. In general, we find after action reviews, as in this example, a really good entry-level tool to use with teams and individuals we're working with for the first time. There's no jargon, there's no scary language about performance or measures. It's quick, and people value the opportunity to give their opinion. That's something that we're generally not short of. And it's really flexible to the circumstances you're in. Sometimes, and this is what we're going to do today, we leave an after action review on a Miro board for people to add to themselves after an event or after a period of time, which makes it really inclusive, both working around people's time commitments and allowing more reflective types to contribute away from a busy meeting. The simplicity and flexibility means we found after action reviews work well out there in the wild, as we sometimes refer to our departments and colleges. And staff who've worked with us in the continuous improvement team, but who are now in operational business as usual roles in departments and services, are using after action reviews to take stock with their teams at intervals throughout the year. So rather than after a particular activity, just at a sensible interval. Because it's such a simple, adaptable format, they're finding it easy to use. It encourages discussion and feedback, and most importantly, provides space to reflect on things as a team. So doing that can help teams bring teams together to understand how they got to where they are, what they can be proud of, and what they can do next. The after action review provides structure for those conversations, and the discipline of doing them means that time is taken to reflect on things like annual processes, lots of which are repeated over time, which are often just forgotten until next year, with the same inefficiencies and frustrations occurring time after time. So after action reviews are a really accessible and important tool in facilitating that everyday learning for individuals and teams, and both in projects and in business as usual environments. So we've got another pause point here. We'd like to hear from you, either in the chat or raise hands if you wish, about the approaches that you use to review activity, and any hints or tips you'd like to share with the group. Is there anything in the chat, Emma?
Yes, there is. So, well, there is a question about whether we would mind sharing templates for pods and AAR, and I think the intention is to do that, Sara. We're just working out what's the best way to do that, aren't we?
Yeah.
So yes, we will make that available to everybody. And Nicola was saying that she really likes the focus on why things went well, and that perhaps they don't always do that. And Jennifer Humphrey has asked, is the feedback anonymous? So, I mean, I can say something about that in terms of that example. So obviously, as I was in the AAR, I know who gave the feedback because I'm there, but in reporting it back to the team and recording it, I would not put names to it. So it's a safe space for people to give their feedback, and what we're interested in is what we can do differently next time rather than who said what. So it is anonymous effectively. Yeah.
So actually, Emma, the sort of online AARs have allowed anonymity. I always have problems saying that word, don't they? Because we don't actually know who's necessarily posted the post-its, whereas you might do if you saw somebody go up and put it up in a room.
Yeah, that's true.
So that is an advantage of the online.
It is, yeah. So we did it in a Teams environment, so we were all on camera, but we were, you know, we were a team, we'd worked together and we knew why we were doing it. But there are ways of getting the feedback anonymously if that's the way that you want to do it. And I would certainly not report the feedback with names attached, because it's kind of not relevant, I don't think. Sarah has asked, sorry, that's just, we undertake retrospectives within sprints to reflect what went well and what can be improved for the next sprint. So that's doing it. That's a good idea, using it throughout a project to inform the next step. Within our team, Lisa Earls has said within our team, we use a retrospective model, but I haven't added customer feedback, and really likes the idea of having the Miro board available to those we work with. That's another thing about using the Miro board, I think, is that you can leave it there. So if something occurs to people outside of the meeting, you know, when you finish the AAR, they can go back and add it. So it can be a kind of live AAR that is ongoing. I don't think we have any more questions. Oh, one more message has just popped up. So this is Denise Kelly is just saying that they don't implement AAR as such, but they do complete a project closure document that includes a section for what went well and lessons learnt. There's a feedback section from stakeholders, though generally it's not as collaborative as the AAR process. Yeah, so I don't know if you wanted to say something about what we do in Focus.
Yes, actually, Emma, that leads very nicely onto the next section.
Yes,
Thank you, Denise. Right, yeah. So this is about learning every day. This is about discoveries. And as we've talked about, and it was just raised in the chat there, we often do lessons learnt. You know, I come from an IT background, and that is a common thing to do at the end of IT projects, or what lessons have we learned? And, you know, it's at the end of a long piece of work. Sometimes you've forgotten the things that you learnt way back in the early days of the project. And I was never actually sure whether we really learnt the lessons. And so, yes, have you actually learnt anything that will change your behaviour in the future? So instead, in our team, we talk about discoveries. So these are experiences that encourage individuals and teams to look at things differently and to take on or foster the growth mindset that I mentioned earlier. And we do this every day. We do it as part of our daily update. We call it like a daily huddle. We meet every morning at 9:15, and one of the tabs on our daily update is discoveries. We then every 6 weeks at our team meeting, we then go through the discoveries from the last 6 weeks, not sort of individually, but people are asked to say which one really resonated with them and that has kind of stayed with them and changed something about them. So we find that recording them by the type of discovery is really useful, because sometimes it could be about a behaviour, about a mindset. It might be the way we're working, our kind of methodology. It might be about processes. It's often about tech. It could be something about how we've found out how to do something online. Or it could be about the university or the wider sort of HE environment. And so we obviously record the date and who raised it as well. And then we can look at the sort of, we can categorize them and look at them as a series of different types. So some discoveries may lead to changes in our ways of working, impacting the whole team. And so it's important to agree what action does that lead to and how we might need to communicate the change to others. So I thought it would be useful just to share some of the, this is 4 examples that I've picked that we've raised recently. And they're quite different types of things. So the first one is about tech, as I said. It's somebody discovered the task view. Now, this might be very obvious to many of you, but it was like a bit of a revelation to us. The task view, the little icon on the bottom left of the Windows screen, it's like, oh, it shows you what documents you've been working on over the past week. And that was all a bit of a revelation. So somebody found that, and the rest of us didn't know about that either. So it was definitely a thing worth sharing. On one of our projects, we found, it was a COVID type project actually, we found that there were more under 18 students in Oxford than we had realised. So that really affected some of the drafting of comms to students. And also when we were looking at testing, COVID testing, it had an impact on some of the kind of legalities around that. So that was a really important learning. This one, was kind of more motivational, I'd say. We had a project that with around graduate accommodation, and it was delivered really, really quickly. It was a real success story, and it was the discovery was that, you know, with the right people and the right will, we actually can develop and deliver a service very quickly. A lot of our projects can be quite long. And the change comes at the end, but it can be quite slow. But keep the faith. When you have the right people and the right will, you can introduce change quickly and successfully. And then this is a more topical one. Recently, the petrol station that somebody used had a very good process for making sure customers could access petrol in calm and managed way. Now, to people outside the UK, you might think, isn't that a bit obvious? But we've had a bit of a run on petrol in the UK over the last month or so, and there were very, very long queues and a lot of very frustrated customers. So it kind of reminded us that even in those turbulent times, a simple, well thought through process can have a huge effect. So that's just giving you a flavour of the types of things that we think about. So I'd say the top tips are to reflect every day. And I think this is key. It's not sort of lessons learned at the end of a piece of work, which is still important, but this is about thinking every day about what you've learned, capturing that discovery as you experience them, and sharing the discovery. Because if you found something that resonated with you or you found interesting, then it very probably others will too. So why are they useful? Well, we learn from each other and adapt. And I think that's really important. It's incremental learnings, just like incremental change. And it builds trust in the team. When I first joined the team, it felt a bit strange to me to talk about what I discovered. It can feel quite personal. Going back to the Johari window, you're actually revealing a little bit about, you're putting something else in your public arena about yourself. But I think in the right team and done in the right way, which is non-judgmental, encouraging, open and transparent, it really does build trust, and it builds a cohesive teamwork. So I hope that's been useful thinking for you. And we'd like to challenge you now to think, what have you learned? What discovery have you made over the course of the conference so far? We're almost halfway through it, that will change your behaviour going forward. And how are you going to share that learning? So if you'd like to put in the chat anything that has really resonated with you, maybe from our presentation, maybe from previous ones, then we'd really welcome to learn about that. So we'll just give you, have we got any chat questions or comments, Emma, from?
Wondering if there's, oh, hang on, something, a new one has just, so Catherine Payne has said that she's going to use visuals to help get messages across more effectively.
Yeah, good one, Catherine, yes.
And Sarah loves the daily approach, says that, agrees that reflection is essential. Lisa also said, I'll be sure to share this presentation with my team. This is an area that we have room for growth in.
Oh, so I'm really pleased to hear that, Lisa. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Carla Anderson said, from improving learning transfer session today, using pre and post learning to improve results. And Nicholas Smith really likes the AAR, so he's going to give that a go.
Good.
Excellent. Yeah, so it's really interesting that people are taking this stuff, they're going to take it back and share it with their teams, not keep it to themselves. Oh, and Carla is going to build discoveries into their daily huddles.
Excellent, good.
Yeah, and Kerry is saying that she's definitely going to take these tools back to the team to provide some structure.
That's really good. I'm really pleased to hear that. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
it's a very sort of egalitarian thing as well. Yeah. You know, it's it's not a sort of non-hierarchical thing. We all can discover things. It doesn't matter what role you have in the team. Yeah,
so a couple more people have said that they're going to introduce discoveries, and I think that's really interesting, because when we talked about this within Oxford at a presentation, that was the discoveries has really resonated with people, and I think it's the simplicity of it, and it can just be things that you know that you go, oh, and you've suddenly got somewhere that you can share them and learn from them. And Evelyn is going to be using the pod for my coaching and mentoring, which is great. Yeah, and Lisa is just saying that they've added a section to their huddle board for the team to add bits of information that stands out for them at the conference this week. So that's really, I think
that's good. We're doing something similar, actually. Yeah.
Let me see if I can keep up. Discoveries is a great way. So Catherine Payne is saying that discoveries are a great way for those new to HE to share what they observe and what we may not see. So kind of fresh eyes.
Fresh eyes.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. I'm going to try improving our sales session with our community of practice. Wish me luck. Well, I'm sure it'll go very well. And you'll learn something from it as well. So tools that are new.
We actually ran this a similar presentation, didn't we, Emma, at one of our professional services conference recently, and somebody contacted us the very next day and said, loved your presentation, thank you, I've set myself up a personal discoveries log, so something that she was going to keep, do every day for herself, and I just thought, wow, that's brilliant.
And
people take to it differently.
And I think the thing is that they are really versatile tools. You know, you can, in lots of different situations, they're all doing fundamentally the same thing, which is making sure that you pay attention to things that you learn, information, get that information, and that you use it. And Sarah Carter said, capturing key points that resonate from me from all of the sessions in a very small way. And sharing with my peers in the Lean Student Practitioner group. So that's great. It's really important, isn't it, that when you've discovered something that you share it. And it's great if you've got a forum, a ready-made forum, that you can share it. So Julie Anderson is saying we struggle with getting lessons learned in our daily stand-ups more because the team forget to keep a note of them as we are learning new things all the time. However, I think introducing discoveries is a change, and we might have more input. I think that is important, because you only got to remember it for a day. There's so much going on that something can make you go, oh, I must remember that, and unless you've got a chance to record it and share it with somebody really quickly, it will just be forgotten, probably.
Because on Monday mornings, Emma, the discovery section is quite quiet, isn't it? Yes. We're not all firing on sort of on all cylinders Monday mornings. And
that's right. If we've discovered something on Friday, the weekend has intervened and pushed it out of our minds. So And Joe Hoskins is saying, don't think everyone else already knows everything. Framing things as discoveries allows better sharing. And I think that's really interesting, because you know, like you said with the thing about the taskbar, you could keep that to yourself because you think, oh, it's just me, everybody knows that. But actually, if you share it, we found that in our team, actually nobody really knew what it was. So plenty of people might, but there will also be plenty of people for whom it will also be a revelation. So it's good to share. yeah, you probably already know that we often start, you know, off the very simple discoveries with a little, oh, you probably already know this, but yeah. So it's always worth sharing them, particularly when it's so quick and easy to do.
So thank you very much, everyone. That's yeah, really interesting feedback, and I'm glad it's resonated well with you. I just wanted to say, are there any other, I wanted to leave you with this image, which was our thought for the week from our team meeting yesterday. We take it in turns to come up with a thought for a week, and I thought, oh, that's really good for my presentation tomorrow. Life is like a camera, focus on what's important, capture the good times, develop from the negative, and if things don't work out, take another shot. I just thought that summed it up brilliantly. And if anyone has got any other sort of comments or questions for us on any of the topics we've covered today, we're welcome to add them to the chat now. Or well, I think Maria's actually added, haven't you, Maria, the link to our AAR for this session, and we really would welcome your feedback. I hope we've given you that impression that we really do want to know what you thought and what could be improved and what you think went well and why. So thank you very much for your attention today, everyone, and I really hope you found it useful.
I just wanted to extend our thanks and a round of applause, if you could, for Sara, Maria, and Emma. What an interesting and well done presentation. I hope everyone gets to the Miro board to leave feedback. I've learned